if you want to try to understand British politics and everything that's wrong with it, all you really need to do is look at Jacob Rees-Mogg. This is the embodiment of everything that is wrong with politics in the UK today. An incredibly arrogant, smug, self-centered piece of human scum. A man who was born into an incredibly rich family and somehow thinks that he earned everything that has been given to him, despite the fact that when he takes control of his companies, they hemorrhage money. They only actually make money when he stops having anything to do with them. This is a man who chastises and condemns people who have to take any form of benefits, whether it's job seekers allowance, whether it's housing benefits, and yet he has a long history of falling asleep at work. He's been caught numerous times sleeping in the Houses of Parliament, constantly, or more or less constantly, while he was a backbencher, but even now when he is a frontbencher, and yet chalks it up to tradition. It's not tradition to be a wretch. But that is Jacob Rees-Mogg, a two-faced hypocrite who sees nothing wrong with taking as much money as possible, pining for the Victorian eras where the masses suffered, and condemning anyone who isn't privileged enough to be born into a wealthy family. Recently, he had an interview with Channel 4 with Krishna, I believe his name is. I'll check myself in the description below, where I'll also leave a link to that interview for anyone who wants to watch it. Now, obviously, I have issues with a few things that he said. I also have an issue with how I'm assuming his name's Krishna. I think his name's Krishna. I'm assuming. I also have a few issues with how Krishna handled it, because there were a number of times where Jacob Rees-Mogg said things that blatantly weren't true, and while some of it was challenged, a lot of it wasn't, especially when it comes to language. But I'm going to get into that. So he starts off talking about the Irish backstop, saying that it's an undemocratic backstop and nobody wants it. Well, here's the thing. Undemocratic or democratic doesn't really play into account here, because it is a necessity. This man claiming to be a unionist and doesn't want to destroy the union, which is an absolute lie. He doesn't give a damn about the union. Also going on to say, at the moment, livestock isn't checked one by one, and it won't be checked going forward. We just don't need the backstop. It is either an outright lie, or his stupidity is getting the better of him. Because that's what the backstop is. It is a way of avoiding a hard border. Now, nobody wants a hard border, of course they don't. But that is the reality. If there is no deal, if there is no backstop, then there is a border. That is the reality of the world we live in, which will absolutely shit on the Good Friday Agreement, which nullifies all prospect trades with America, because Donald Trump is not the Lord and Master of all. It has to go through the Houses of Congress. It has to go through Congress, I believe that one. House of Representatives or the House of Congress. Either way, it needs Democrats to sign off on it. And Democrats have said they're not going to sign off on it unless they're not going to sign off on a deal with the UK unless we respect the Good Friday Agreement and don't treat Ireland like a piece of shit, which Jacob Rees-Mogg is, by coming out with BS nonsense, saying it's an undemocratic backstop and we don't need it. Do need it. You're either lying or you haven't bothered reading anything at all, you fucking idiot. So I would have challenged him on that, and it's kind of annoying that Krishna didn't. He went on saying nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. I understand that. This was in response to the EU saying things like they won't negotiate, they won't renegotiate. Now it's a yes and no, because while this man constantly tries to clarify and get context on the hard questions that he doesn't want to answer, he seems very, very quick to use that as a blanket statement, which it's not true. The big things, like the backstop, is not up for negotiation. That has to be said. And again, I've said this a million times. From day one, the EU was very clear. Everything is up for negotiation, but you have to sort out the Irish border. That is a must. No ifs, ands, or buts. The more you look into it, the more of a problem you see with it and how difficult of a thing it is. So the backstop, while not being perfect, is a necessity. And at the moment, it is the only thing that we had. When this was explained to Boris Johnson, it's reported that he slumped in his seat, realising, oh shit, I'm too damn dumb for this. That's just my speculation of what he was thinking, but hey ho. So saying that the EU wasn't prepared to renegotiate, the EU has said on the major things like the backstop, no, that's done and done. The small things we have no issue with. We can negotiate the small things, but the big things, they protect us, they protect the Republic of Ireland, they protect the North of Ireland. They have to remain in place. They are non-negotiable. If you want to deal with us, that has to be protected. Because Republic of Ireland is still an EU state. It's still part of the European Union. So of course they're going to protect their own before anything else. We do the same. He was asked about the 39 billion, because in the past he said it was an awful thing. It goes to show the hypocrisy that he has, and again plays into how politics has got into the shit show that it is. Because when it's his boy, when it's Bojo the cowardice clown, who might end up coming back with the exact same deal as Theresa May, he loves it. He loves the 39 billion. And his issue that he backtracked and said the issue with the 39 billion is because we agreed on that price before we agreed on the terms. Here's the thing. Here's why we agreed on that price. Because our legal professionals, our politicians, our experienced and seasoned politicians in Europe and in the UK got into a room with their legal professionals and their seasons and everything else, and they agreed any kind of deal we have going forward, we would have to pay 39 billion, because that would be the benefit that the UK would get. That would be the loss that the EU would face if we remained part of the EU going forward. That is a really bad way of describing it. You get free stuff from the shop. Okay, you get free stuff from the shop because you've got a relationship with whoever owns it. Well, you break off that relationship. Maybe you're married to the kids of the shop owner or something like that, and you suddenly have to start paying for products. That's, again, not a good analogy, but it's a lot closer than what I previously said. So that's why that price is there. And Krishna, excuse me, he knows that. Now, I honestly don't know if Jacob knows that, because he's an incredibly lazy individual and he doesn't care. He only cares about getting us out before the first, so he doesn't have to pay tax in this country. But certainly, he's either outright lying, he knows the truth and he's lying, or he's a moron and in 3 years hasn't bothered to fact check anything, rather keeping to his talking points. So that's the issue I have with that. The EU agreement, I've already said. He was asked if he'd resign if he couldn't get what he wanted, if he couldn't get what he'd said he'd been wanting to give to the country, if he couldn't get the extension, if he couldn't get Brexit, would he resign? He didn't answer that, but he did say that Boris shouldn't resign under any circumstances. Boris shouldn't resign. And also that Boris must not extend. Now here's the thing. For this man who loves to jump around and use loopholes, as it stands, it would be an illegal action for Boris to not seek for an extension. And also, when you take into account of just what's right and what's wrong, I don't care where you fall on the side of Brexit. We are not prepared to leave the European Union. I've used this analogy before. Guy goes into a doctor's office, the doctor says, "I'm sorry, you've got cancer, but it's early stages, here is everything we can do to get you sorted." And the guy says, "Fake news, Project Fear," and fucks off. Nothing has been done. The NHS is still saying we will have huge medical shortages and it will lead to people's deaths. Despite Galloway saying, "Of course we can import drugs." Well, yeah, we can still buy these drugs and we could make these drugs. But we don't currently make any insulin in this country at all. And we haven't started making it. And we haven't set up a system where medical drugs get rushed through. The most common medication for people who have epilepsy and seizures, we don't make that in this country either. And it's the same thing. And it's more than just these two medications. It is 100 other things just in the NHS. And then it's import and customs. And then it's border checks. And then it's making sure that food comes into the country and gets out of customs before it spoils. It's making sure that businesses who get most of their income by international trade can still do that without paying a goddamn fortune. All of these things that Remainers have been saying, this is an issue. None of that has been resolved. Not a single goddamn thing. So it is right now an illegal action to take us out of the European Union with no deal on the 31st of this month. But as just a general, is it right? No, you are a prick if you force us out of the EU when we have nothing ready. And again, I go back to what was said before the referendum with talking heads going on the TV. They all said the same thing. They said we would set everything up and then we would trigger Article 50. Very first day Theresa May got into Downing Street, she caved to the ERG. She caved to Jacob Rees-Mogg and his cronies. And she triggered Article 50, despite the fact that we had done nothing. And in the 3 years since, still nothing. The closest we came was allowing Chris Grayling to piss away a fortune into a company that couldn't possibly deliver on what they said they were going to deliver. Now, I know his defense was, well, if they don't follow through, they don't get the contract. But he still spent a fortune in consultation meetings. The taxpayer paid a fortune for nothing. And that's what has been the common thread throughout all of this. The taxpayer has paid through the nose for things to not be done. Constantly pushing, no, it's not just Jacob who does this, pushing for a general election rather than another referendum. And the reason why they're doing this is the same reason why they prorogue Parliament. And his reaction to being questioned if he was ashamed of proroguing, if he was ashamed of lying to the Queen, was an amazing bit of gymnastics. But again, pushing for a general election, I think this is something that needs to be pushed front and centre and challenged every single time one of these scumbags comes out and says it. A general election is everything. It's universal credits, it's the NHS, it's social care, it's everything. A referendum is a single issue, and that's what we're facing here. Do we leave with no deal? Do we leave with the deal that May came up with? Or do we stay? Constantly coming out, well, the people, deserve their say in a general election. A general election will shut down Parliament. That will take away our voice and our power from our Parliament. That will also take away our voice and our power from the EU. Again, so that Jacob Rees-Mogg can leave the European Union before the 1st of January so he doesn't have to pay tax. And I think everyone doing interviews should constantly push this forward. If it's one issue, why are you pushing for a general election? Why do you want to strip this country of its voice? Referendum is very different to a general election. Again, dodging his dodging of the questions when it came to proroguing, because he had a very strong hand in it. It didn't just come off of Boris Johnson. Jacob Rees-Mogg also chatted to the Queen, also lied to the Queen. And again, it's one of them weird things that you see. He's very quick to bring up how important context is when he's trying to cover his own arse or dodge answering a question that he knows he effed up. So when it came to this of illegal, he was very quick to point out, it's not illegal, it's unlawful, there's a difference. I mean, the difference is you haven't gone to prison yet, you stuck-up prick. But constantly bringing that up. And then, again, the language that they use. The Supreme Court ruled, 11 judges, the highest court in this country, the be-all and end-all, ruled that it was an unlawful action. Well, I disagree. I mean, that's your opinion, man, but you're not a legal professional, so shut the fuck up. That's how simple it is. And constantly using things like the Surrender Act. And I had a conversation with someone today who said the exact same thing. And my response was, how exactly is it surrender? How exactly is this a Surrender Act? Because the people that parrot this kind of language, they've clearly not read this. Now, I can tell you why I don't like May's bill. Because it doesn't give people in this country the protections that we currently have. We currently have a number of protections from the European Court of Justice, and Theresa May's Withdrawal Act does not keep them at all. That's an issue for me. That's an issue knowing that most people won't vote and that the Conservatives will cling on to power. The party that is constantly saying they do not believe in human rights and they want to get rid of human rights and workers' rights. When you have a cabinet full of the most deplorable British politicians in history, that worries me. But as far as everything else, it's the best out of a bad situation. And I've said over and over and over again, why do you want to leave the EU? Give me one good reason. What law do you think they make us abide by? And every single time it comes up short. There was one. Credit where credit's due. There was one. But only one person has ever brought that up. It's a good argument. It's a fair argument. But it's not a fantastic argument when a strong voice in the EU should be able to fix it. Now, I won't deny that there are a ton of issues with the EU. But this country leaving the European Union in the sorry state that it is, in a government that would rather lie and be held in contempt and break the law and just not care, rather than actually put money into the economy so we stand a fighting chance. It's remarkable. But again, if you still support Brexit, this is what you support. You support the hypocrites coming out. You support the people like Jacob Rees-Mogg who constantly use language knowing full well that it inspires nutcases to murder good people. That's the state of British politics. Jacob Rees-Mogg is the embodiment of everything that's wrong with British politics today.